Hello everyone and welcome back to the Don't Hub channel. So this is Christian, and in today's video I'm just going to walk you through how you can set up your fast API server, and also you are going to create some endpoints and then test them. So for this and more, grab your favorite drink and let's get started. Alright, so this is my desktop and I have a folder here called fast API. So this is the folder I'll be working in. Alright, so with this particular project we are going to install a couple of things. The first one is fast API and also Uvicorn. So if you don't have them installed, you have to install them. So you just open your command terminal and then you type in pip install Uvicorn, which I will show you in a couple of minutes. Now I'll be using VS Code as my code editor. So I've already opened the folder in VS Code, which is fast API, right? So I'm just going to open my terminal by just pulling it up here, right? And then I'm just going to type in pip install fast API and Uvicorn and press enter to install them for me. But I've already done that, so I'm not going to install it again. So fast forward, we can now start. Okay, and I'm just going to click here and then the first one, which is create new file. So I'm just going to create a file called main.py. Okay, so this is where our server will be sitting, and we are just going to import fast API. Okay, so fast API API from from fast API we are going to import fast API. Okay, and then we are also going to import Pydantic, which always comes with fast API. Okay, so import base model from that. Okay, so these are the two things we are going to import. So the first one we are going to use it to set our server up and running, and then with the second one we are going to use it to define the or validate our data. Okay, so when there is a post request, we will use that to create a class that we will use it to basically define the data. Okay, so the next thing is to create our application. Okay, which is our app, and we are going to use the fast API we imported at the top there. I'm going to call it here. Okay, so this is going to create our, so let me just leave some comments here. So create an instance. Okay, so create an instance of the application. Right, and then the next one we are going to create endpoints for that. So let's say this is how we create it. So you bring the @ symbol, so add the application dot get. Okay, and then you're going to pass in your route. So this is the first route, the initial route we are going to implement. Okay, and for each of them you have to define a function that should be called when a user or a client makes a request to this endpoint. Okay, and then the first one we will just name it, let's say read route, because that is the base route. Okay, I mean the base endpoint, so that's why I'm calling it this. And then when someone accesses this, what should happen? Okay, so when someone accesses this, we will just want to return a message. Okay, and this message I'm going to say let's say maybe welcome to fast API. Okay, probably, yeah, I think this is fine. So this is the first endpoint we are creating, and let's try and test it and see if it will work. Okay, so how we test it, we first have to save the file. Okay, and then we open our terminal, we make sure we are in the root directory, then we are going to type in uvicorn main colon app and then dash dash reload. So the uvicorn is going to run it for us, and we are defining the file name, which is name, and then inside the file we want to run the application. Okay, and then we are using dash dash reload to create a hot reload, so whenever we make changes it will reload it for us. We don't need to kill the server and then start it up again. Okay, so I'm just going to press enter to start the project, and as you can see here we have some information here. We'll watch for any changes. Okay, and then we have been given the URL here, right? So I'm just going to copy the URL, which we'll be using for a second. And then as you can see here, we've started, and then the application startup has been completed. So I'm using an extension which is tender client for just making some requests. Okay, yeah. So you can also download that extension by going to the extension, and then you just search for tender. So you just search for tender client, and then once you get it, you just click on install to install it. Okay, so back to this place. So we just replace the default URL you had there with the one that was given here. Okay, so once you replace that, let's send a request. All right, so we are getting a response here, which is the message, and the message is welcome to FastAPI. So it means our server is up and running. So now we can just play along and then create some other endpoints. Okay, so I would like to create another endpoint. So again, we go with the at symbol dot get. Okay, and then we are just going to create an endpoint for, let's say, items. Okay, and then this time around I would like to add some queries and params to it. Okay, and this is how we do it. So you pass in the endpoints, and then bring your query braces, and then you type item, whatever ID you want to give it. Okay, and then down here you are going to again define the function that should be called, and then let's give this a function. Let's say read item or something. Okay, and then with this read item you are going to pass in the item ID, which you are getting here. Okay, and then we are just going to define what it should be. So it should be, let's say, an integer, and then we can define a query as well. And let's say a query is supposed to be a string. Okay, oops, yeah, so a query is supposed to be a string, and by default we can set it to null. Okay, because not all the case that we would like to add a query. Okay, and then from there we can now do some logics or do whatever you want to do with that. So I would like you just simply return an information. So let's say you just pass in that the item ID is or was. Okay, the item ID is, and then you're just going to give the item ID here, and then if the person made some query, we are just going to add the query as well. So let's say query, and then we say the query was kill, right? And then let's go and try that one as well. So as you see, the moment we save it, we had a warning saying start reload detect changes in the main.py. Okay, so it detected a change and it has to shut down the server and then restart the server again. So now our server is up and running again. So let's go back to the tender clients, and for now let's change the URL endpoint to item. Okay, and then let's pass in, let's say, an integer, let's say 3. Okay, and then let's make a request, right? So as you can see here, we are getting some message, and the first one says item ID is 3 because we pass in 3 here, and then the query is now. So now let's try and add a query. So let's say q equals let's say done. Okay, and then let's press or let's send it, and as you can see here, we are getting the done. So whatever name you give to this the query, you should give the same name here. Okay, so for instance, if we say p and then now we press enter, you see the query are getting now because we are not saving the variable, or we are saving this variable here. Okay, then it's supposed to be q. So I'm just going to change it again, and as you can see, we have done here. So we've been able to create a get endpoints, right? So now let's move on to creating a post endpoint. Okay, so to make a post request. So with that, we have to create some class that will be using it to validate whatever data that is coming to our server. We don't want to accept any kind of data, okay, specific kind of data. So we just have to create a class, and then let's say let's give it a name. And then the class name, let's say item, because we are dealing with items, right? And then we are just going to pass in the base model. Okay. And then so our item should have a name. Okay. And then our item should have a price, and then the price should be an integer, or let's say float would be ideal. And then the item should also have a description. Okay, so a description. And then the description should be a string. Okay. And we don't want the description should be mandatory, right? So we can just say by default put none there. Okay. And then add some text. Okay. Tax, sorry, not text, tax. And then the tax should be, let's say, float. Okay. And that one too, not all items should have tax, right? Some of them should have, some shouldn't. So we can make it this way. Okay. So it means whatever request that will be coming from the post endpoint should have a name and price. Those ones are mandatory, but description and tax are optional, right? Right. So once we are done with it, with that, we can now move down here and then create again. We go with the app dot post this time around, and as you can see, we have other ones. We have post patch, and then yeah, we have put as well, right? But let's go with the post, and then we are just going to pass in, define our routes. So item, and then once we define our route, we just come down again, define the function that should be called. So let's say create item. Okay, so we are just defining to create an item, and then we are expecting item here, and this item should be of the class we created at the top there, right? So that is basically what is happening here. And then down here we can perform some, so let's say perform some magic, right? Some magic with the item you some magic with the item you receive, right? So here I would just like to calculate a uh, total amount the item should cost based on um the tax and then also the price of the item. Okay, so here we can just do, let me say total underscore price, and then here I will just do a couple of things here. So item dot, the item should have a field called price, right? And then here we have to add the tax to it, right? And I think the tax here I would like it to be 0, right? Because if, so that if there is no tax, it should be 0, right? And then here I will just say item dot tax, right? Great. So we get our total price here. Then we will send some information back to the user. So again, we use the return. So we are returning the information we had in addition with the total price. Okay. So I think that is all for this. And let's go and try it. So I'm just going to create a new request here, and just going to copy and then paste the URL here, this time around with no params and queries, right? So just item, and then we are just going to change this to post, and then inside the body we're just going to paste some JSON object right here, right? So this is the JSON object. I would like to make a request for it. So we have the name, which is laptop, we have the price, we have some description, and then tax. So now let's find out if our endpoint is working, hopefully. All right, so I think we are getting something. We have to push this one down and pull this one up. Okay, so as you can see here, our status is 200. Everything is working. We have our name, price, description, tax, and then we have our total price as well. Yeah, so we've been able to set up our server, and we've created some endpoints for it. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, kindly click on the subscribe button. turn on your notification bell, and then watch out for interesting videos like this. I'm Christian, and see you in the next video.